Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, April 13th. Friday the 13th. We hope it's a lucky show this week. Tuition, the cost of college tuition. When is it too much, and are local college students being treated fairly? Tensions rise in West Akron after a series of shootings. We'll get the latest. Plus, we're also talking about property taxes, and if you pay them late, is it really that big of a deal when you run for office? Those stories and more next on NewsNite. Great to have you with us this week. Some great topics, so let's meet our panel. Phil Trexler joins us this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. Good to have Stephanie Warsmith with us this week, also from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And great to see Ed Esposito here this week from WAKR. And we begin with a rally yesterday at Kent State as students came out to protest an increase in tuition by credit hour if you're taking more than the full-time hours. And full disclosure, I'm going to be working there soon. You both work there as adjunct professors. Ed, you visited campus plenty of times.
Yes, I have.
I'm also a graduate student there.
I attended Kent State.
So
when it was cheaper.
That said, the students are rising up. The provost says this is going to affect about 1 out of 8 students who really take 18 or more credit hours, a very big load, to have to pay more for it. Are they really being treated unfairly?
I don't know. I think they're being put in line with a lot of other fees being charged by other universities. It's unfortunate. It's just the cost of education just keeps skyrocketing, and there appears to be no real ramifications. In fact, enrollment just goes up. But I don't know of any other business that raises the price of their widgets 3-4% every year with little to no backlash. And it's unfortunate, and there's just the cost of education is just out of control, and there's just it's steamrolling, and there seems to be no way to stop it.
Well, it's not just Kent State either.
No, it's not.
We're talking about a $500 hit, per credit hour for everything over 18 hours and above. Ohio University had a similar sticker shock here when they're talking about most students paying $600 more. You're going to see this round robin. They fall like dominoes. One school does it, the others say, okay, they can do it too, and it moves around. But to Phil's point, and your question is, when does it stop? It stops when people say, I'm not going to pay for it anymore. When parents say, I can't afford this, or we're not doing this, or, I can't afford these student loans anymore. So you have a lot of anecdotal evidence. You have students who, say they're all full of vim and vigor to go, launch a sit-in in the president's office, but they leave after half a day. So what does that tell you? Maybe they ought to talk to their parents about, how to properly conduct a sit-in, because they knew how to do it back in the 70s. If you're going to make a point about doing this and arguing that it costs too much, then you have to stick with it, and you have to find alternatives, whether it's going out of state or otherwise. The only thing that university presidents and governors and provosts and boards of trustees understand is declining enrollment. And if the enrollment stays the same, then that just tells them that they still have a market to charge what they want, because the market will bear those charges. It's simple economics.
I think we see a trend here with universities that, on the state level, they're capping the tuition increase. They continue to do that, but the universities, it seems like they're increasingly coming up with these fees. When I went to Ohio State, and we won't say in what year that was, I don't...
Tell us which football coach was there.
Woody Hayes.
No, not that long.
Bruce wasn't.
I think all of you are older than me here. But, I remember paying tuition. I remember, grumbling about the books, but I don't remember all of these extra fees. And it's not just Kent State. It's not just Ohio University. It's Ohio State. It's University of Akron. They continue, unfortunately, I think, to come up with these fees that the students have to pay. And, I think that makes it harder for kids to go to school when, they really need to be able to find jobs right now.
Another thing, I was talking to my class about this on Wednesday night, and they get frustrated, too, not only by the fees, but of the difficulty that they feel that the university is making it for them to graduate in 4 years. Mm-hmm. It just seems like there are a lot of impediments there, planned or not, to make it more difficult for them to graduate.
Because of cost?
Not because of cost, but just because of the way the classes are laid out and whatnot. But that
was jumping through the requirement hoops.
Exactly. So many requirements, so many obstacles that it makes it impossible almost to graduate in 4 years. And instead, they're spending a fifth year there, and again, it's just the cost is just crushing these families. and frankly, there's, we've talked about it before on the show, the question whether all these kids belong in college, and whether, there's this great promise of a better future with a 4-year degree, and to some kids that's not a reality.
No, but the economic reality still is that if you have a college degree, the chances are that you'll have increased earnings over your lifetime.
Certainly, but there are some
certainly it does open doors.
Yeah, but there are some kids who are just not equipped or not ready for a college, and would be better suited in some perhaps a vocational area. But they're opening their doors to everyone, and that's a great idea. But they're just, I think there needs to be a better filter there.
Well, Kent and the other state universities would all argue that, hey, we've got to raise fees because it's just what it costs for college. The state gives us less money. We got to make up for it somewhere. But how many students are we really talking about when you're talking about 18 hours? That is a huge load to be at 18 hours or more. Are they doing it because they're trying to graduate in less than 4 years? Or because the requirements are so high?
Well, I'm probably the oldest one on this panel here. I remember when 18 hours was standard. And it was not unusual for everyone to take 18 or 19 hours. And I think that's changed a little bit just because of the dynamics these days of having to have a second job, or some of the internship requirements, quite frankly, just astound me. You wonder when professors, make up a plan for this. Are they living in a real world where they expect students to actually work, 300 hours on an internship in a term? I mean, that's basically working 20 hours a week for nothing, or for very little money on that, on top of the fact that they have to go out and, for every credit hour, you got to figure there's at least another hour of study on that. So if you're taking, if you're taking 16 credit hours, it's logical to assume that that's really a full-time job. That's maybe 30 hours a week, 32, 35 hours a week you're putting into that on top of working a part-time job, because you can't afford to pay for this tuition. So I think the sense now is that, you want students to take 15 hours, but then that now you're getting into the territory where, no, you're not going to graduate in 4 years. Just the very nature, again, it's economics and math. I mean, you don't have to take Math 401 to figure this out.
One of my students has told me she's under a scholarship, and she has to take, it pays for a certain number of credit hours, which I think she tries to go over 18 if she can, and that if she, if this happens, then she's still going to have to take that and then have to pay on top of it, because her scholarship's going to run out at a certain point, and she won't be able to pay for the remainder of the tuition that she would need.
And then probably take out a student loan, and that's one thing we haven't even talked about is this bubble of student loans that are going to come due, and there's just billions of dollars out there that it's going to be very difficult for people to repay, especially when they half the people who attend college aren't even graduating, but yet they're leaving with heavy.
So who's really in a no-win situation? Because the students say we're in a no-win situation. We've got to have the credits.
Society.
And the college is saying we're in a no-win situation because we got to pay the bills. So who do we really feel sorry for here?
I mean, you feel sorry for the people that have to foot the bill, which ultimately is going to be the parents or the students themselves. It's kind of hard to feel sorry for the instructors and the administrators at the university level, but they only have so many tools that they have, and they want to have modern facilities. I mean, you make a big push. You hear Proenza and Lefton talk about it here in this area, but Guy does the same thing at Ohio State. If the physical comforts and the transformation of college campuses into centers of learning, or what you've seen at the University of Akron, certainly the University of Akron that we see today versus what it was 15 years ago is remarkable. It's a modern-day institution today, which is why it does attract students. If it was the if it was the Buchtel College, basically, which is what the university was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it didn't attract those people to come in here. That takes money. That landscape for learning was like $500 million. And you could, in some aspect, you could say, well, it came at a good time because Taft was governor and Arshenkov was on the board, and there was a lot of political willpower to get that kind of stuff done. You can't always count on that. You can't always count on an Oliver Ocasek in there to kind of shepherd that money through. You can't always count on a Vern Rife being the Speaker of the House when you want to get money for Shawnee State. And make those kind of arguments. I mean, so, there was a lot of feather bedding in there that was political. Well, now it's time to, pay for these resources. You have $500 million in landscape for learning. Someone still has to pay for the upkeep of those buildings and the maintenance of those buildings. And plus, you still have to keep it as something fresh that will attract new students.
When we talk about new buildings, I want to shift the conversation now over to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
The tension seems to be increasing in West Akron, actually throughout the greater Akron area, after a series of shootings involving teenagers. Some of them have even been fatal. You have both been working on stories with this, and I was out there for the Willie Brewer shooting just 2 weeks ago. I don't know how to put this in perspective, because violence does go up and down at different times in the urban area. It certainly has in Akron before. But this seems to be really putting a lot of people on edge.
Yeah, I know Stephanie's been talking to a lot of kids and from Bookville High School, and there is a lot of tension. There's a lot of fear there. Most people I think in that area are good folks, just trying to make their way through life, and yet they're dodging bullets, on a regular, routine basis. There's reports of gunshots. They had more shots fired this week. The guy just getting off a bus going to the Family Dollar gets hit by a bullet. He's still in the hospital. There's a lot that's going on, and Stephanie's working on talking to the kids and talking to what life is like in off Copley Road there.
Well, I talked to a group of 5 Bookville High School seniors who formed a group called Pray for Better Days. And I just thought it was so interesting. They came and talked to Akron City Council on Monday night. They were one of several groups that came and talked about their concerns about what's been going on over the neighborhood. But I just thought it was so interesting to see a group of teenagers who were really trying to, see if they could have a positive influence here. And so, talking to them, as Phil mentioned, just talking about the fear that they have. One girl said she wanted to go over to her friend's house a couple blocks away, and her friend was petrified that she was going to walk there. I think it's interesting, they've been using Twitter to communicate, and say, there's a shooting over here, stay in the house, things like this. And so, this is an area where there are, it's not like this is the first time they've had crime, but to have 2 shootings within a week, within a couple blocks of each other, and as Phil reported on this week, there was another, shootout where nobody was hurt, but they actually did hit 2 houses, which I'm sure that whoever owns those houses aren't happy about. So, a lot of fear over there. But then also the community, I think, is really trying to come together. Russell Neal, the councilman for Ward 4, is trying to see if he can coordinate the efforts, and also to listen to the youth in the community about, what are their concerns, and how can these different agencies and community groups that are trying to help really try to make a difference over there.
I think it's very tough over there. From talking to the students that you talked to and others in the community, are they cooperating with the police? Because I do hear a continued frustration with the police that it takes so much effort to get some people who may have even witnessed some of these crimes to come forward and be honest about it.
Well, I think there is obviously a lack of witnesses, especially in the Willie Brewer case. Talking to the police, they've not put out very much information on their investigation, because I don't think that there's a whole lot there that they have to go on. There were reports of some kind of social media dispute going on. But
that goes back to his birthday and some Facebook posts from people just dissing him on his Facebook page on his birthday. The fact that he was shot beforehand, I do think it's kind of interesting as to how this raises to this level. I do think there's been kind of a disconnect from the rest of Akron with West Akron. That it's kind of like, well, that's in that neighborhood, I don't have to worry about it. Or that's a problem in Kenmore, I don't have to worry about it. I can go back to my suburban life and not worry about it. Or that's just a gang, or those are just kids, or that's just a drug problem. It's easy to kind of sweep that under the rug and say, well, it's gangs and drugs. But the thing that's kind of heartbreaking, you look at the Willie Brewer case in general. He's a 15-year-old kid. At some point he was a 10-year-old kid. At what point did he go wrong? At what point did someone take him down a path that led him to, perhaps be in danger or to have people be against him? and that, those are the structural problems that you're looking at on here, and I think there's a frustration that those aren't being addressed.
Well, one thing we should mention is, the Bookville cluster has really taken the name hit on this. And that's happened before with things that happened in that neighborhood. We even said it that night that he had attended Bookville but wasn't at the time. It didn't happen on school property. And here they are getting ready for a brand new school, the first new high school, brand new high school in decades, that's going to open in the fall. They're getting $1 million in scholarships across the board, have been awarded to Bookdale students. And yet one thing like this happens, and the school just takes such a hit. That neighborhood takes such a hit. And I guess the question to you guys is, how do the good things that are happening there get their fair share when a few bad things just really tend to taint the whole neighborhood?
But it's not just Bookdale. I mean, look at what happened after the Brewer shooting. I mean, there was, he was a student at Kenmore most recently, and then, there was a spate of, parents freaked out and kids saying that they were worried about something blowing up at Kenmore, about having some issue, and they wanted to leave. So you look at that. I mean, he was also a student at Firestone for a brief period of time. This is not something that's just relegated just to Bookdale. There's probably the stereotype of that because, and for that, it's kind of the media. We all share in this. It's always, it's more crime at Bookdale, or it's more race issues at Kenmore, or it's something like that. So you have these stereotypical labels that are attached to these schools, when in fact these are issues that impact all the schools. I mean, let's not forget. I mean, the Akron Police Department just doesn't go to a handful of schools. There's an active security presence in all these schools where they look at that. I mean, you probably would have made some stereotypical observation shy of a month ago that nothing bad would ever happen at a rural school like Chardon. Mm-hmm. That's just not true anymore.
I think what happened to Willie Brewer, though, it goes to the point of what Akron Police Chief Jim Nice has talked about, and building up this network of intelligence. Kind of using what they did as when he was in the FBI, getting out there on the streets, talking to people, trying to fend off incidents such as this before they happen. It's a great task to get people in the community, unfortunately, to cooperate with police. But that's the tack that NICE wants to take, to interview people, to be in the neighborhood, not so much community policing, but, building an intelligence network, whereas they're able to, know about the disputes that are going on, know about the revenge that's being threatened, and gang problems or drug deals that gone bad, and who's angry at who, and what's going to happen there, and that's what's got to happen. There's got to be a greater network of communication between law enforcement and the community, and that's what's lacking. And I think that's why we have incidents like this. The police can only do so much. If society is not going to be a partner with police, then you're not going to have any resolution. You're just going to have more people like Willie Brewer shot down at such a young age.
And going along with that, one of the things that Russell Neal's talking about is better coordination among the different agencies here. That with Willie Brewer and what happened with him, that if there had been better communication, like between the schools and the community center and people in the community and the police that were aware of what was going on with him, then maybe something could have been done. And they're hoping that by coordinating better among all the different agencies and community groups, that can help them to intervene or as Russell Neal calls it, interrupt before things escalate to this level.
As I understand, Willie Brewer was in front of Superintendent David James just 2 weeks before this incident, identified as an at-risk student, and David James was very blunt with him about you need to change your ways and the people you're with, or bad things are going to happen in your future, and unfortunately they did. I don't know how much more can be said, but these are the sad days that really table a neighborhood very, very hard.
Again, to go back to it, the problem is that, the people that are watching this show tonight that live in the suburbs don't see this yet as their problem. They see it as a problem in the inner city. I mean, we even talk about this, there's these problems in these inner city neighborhoods. And it's not just the inner city neighborhoods. I mean, these are neighborhoods right now that have a culture of mistrust of authority, which is why you have this no snitch policy, which, you talk to Russell Neal and Marco Somerville. I mean, in the past they've been critical of the police department. They're not critical of the police department now. They're asking and begging the community to come out and say, it's not a question of snitching when you're talking about someone who went out and is killing your kids, which is, what the situation is. But, to Stephanie's point, I mean, these are kids that are fearful. They're afraid to come in and talk about it. It's not a question of no snitch. It's a question is, boy, if I go in and talk about some problem that's brewing to that point, I'm going to pay a price for this.
And it's not just getting beat up; it's getting shot.
Getting shot.
These kids don't fight with fists anymore; they fight with guns.
Right. So I mean, you have to have an active authoritative presence that'll go in and back it up and protect these kids from that kind of stuff.
Let me finish that point as we move the discussion now to NewsNite.net.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
His name is Ron Antal. He lives in northern Summit County, pays his taxes, but he paid them a bit late. He says it was a clerical error. He corrected it, paid his fines, no big deal, 3 times. Challenge is he's running for County Fiscal Officer. That is, ironically, the office that collects your property taxes. Is it a big deal politically when you're running for office that you paid your bill late?
It certainly isn't a way to kick off your campaign, I'll tell you that. That's, my taxes are fortunately paid on time,
That's because you're a newspaper reporter. You make so much money.
Yeah, still. You're running for fiscal office. The last thing you want to do is pay your taxes late. That's just, that's step number one. What bothers you the most, I think, is the fact that this didn't happen one time. It's happened 3 times. Mm-hmm. Granted, he's explained them each time, but still, the average person pays their property taxes on time, and this is not what he needed. He's got a heavy, long hill to climb to try to unseat Christine Scalise, and this certainly puts him, back down there at the bottom where he's going to have to climb out of. It's certainly not a good positive story for him to have that sort of situation come out publicly like that.
But they are paid. They're not delinquent.
No, they're paid. Yeah.
He owned up to it. So is it really a big deal?
No, but is it a big? It's up to the voters to decide whether it's a big deal. These are public records, and anybody can go take a look at it. It's similar to, what else is a public record? Somebody's voting record. We saw this to some extent with the Summit County Sheriff's race in the Democrat primary. Who's the real Democrat? Who's the one that occasionally goes over and votes Republican or does this? These are all things that it's good for the public to be aware of, and for the candidates to explain. Some people. I don't personally think it's a big deal. For my personal decision on that, my question is it paid? Are they going after him? And I can see where, occasionally, you might be late once, twice, 3 times. It's a clerical error, but they were paid. Are you in arrears on anything? The question arises, though, as a voter is, okay, if you're in charge and you have a history of always paying late, what does that mean for your administration of the system when it comes to others paying late? Because we expect you to run this office in a professional manner, which means you pay this stuff on time, and you try and figure it out. Those are appropriate questions to ask when you have the candidate in there, or when you're talking to them, or you're trying to decide who you're going to vote for.
This comes down to attention to detail. Is it politically okay, though? Is it in that arena that you guys would look at when you're doing the background on a candidate?
Well, I think it's, like Ed said, I think it's a legitimate question for the voters. And certainly if all of a sudden everyone paid their taxes late, I think it could be a problem. Mm-hmm. So, it's he did come in and told Rick Armon from the Beacon about this because he knew that it was likely going to be a campaign issue. I'm sure we're going to be hearing more about it as the campaign goes forward between now and November. But I think it certainly doesn't look good for the fiscal officer to not pay the taxes on time, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
Right. When you mention the voters, they'll get to weigh in. The voters will not be weighing in on the issue in Cuyahoga Falls in regards to the natatorium. That will be decided by the Park and Rec Board, a group we thought was done with this issue. They sent it to City Council. City Council sent it back to them. They have a meeting last night, and they still haven't made up their minds on whether they're going to offer a discounted rate to same-sex couples. This is dragged on now into the 3rd month.
I think they'll make a decision next month. I won't be surprised if Gorbach offers a motion again to have a head count or a household head count. Determine this. That he tried to do that in March. It failed on a 3-2 passage. The opponents of this make an argument, and you can't discount the argument. What's the financial cost of this? And at a time when you're saying that programs should pay for themselves and we should be fiscally responsible, is there a cost to this? Those costs, according to some, run anywhere from an impact of $40,000 plus to $100,000 plus. So if you reorient these fees, who pays the price for that at some point? Do you raise the fees otherwise to make that up? We talk about college education. If you belong to the natatorium and they have a shortfall, everyone who belongs in the natatorium eventually pays for it. in the price of a higher rate. So I think they want to try and get their arms around that as to whether or not that's a valid excuse. The critics of the way the program is now just say that it's discriminatory and it does not showcase the falls it showcases the falls in a less than welcoming light.
The longer this drags on, Stephanie, the longer they lose in the court of public opinion, should we say?
Right. I think the fact that the debate has gone on so long just really makes the falls look bad. And you know, so it just won't go away. It's like an issue that won't go away, you know.
And they're talking about the development over at Portage Trail, and it's mind-boggling that they would want this to fester for so long. They're trying to, showcase themselves as a progressive place to come and run your business, but yet they have this outmoded, price scale for an auditorium. And if it's going to cost 40, 50 grand, I don't know that that's necessarily true, but it might attract actually more people if you restructure the fee schedule. But it's just, these are, 1960s pricing with, and it just I think it just creates this, reinforces, I think, some of these stereotypes that folks have about Cuyahoga Falls.
Which is taking a beating online as well.
Absolutely, and I just don't know why they continue to let it fester.
The Falls isn't the only one that does this either. Even looking at what the Beacons reported, when you look, there are some that just do it by head count. There are still other government and non-government run fitness centers that do use the same kind of language that Falls does. So, generation. This may be something that takes a little bit longer than we might think to get this out of the way. And the Falls just happens to be the target for it now.
I just think it seems so outdated.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let you have the last word. Outdated. Write in, tell us what you think of that. Ed, Stephanie, Phil, thank you so much for being with us. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. We'll see you right here next Friday for Newsnight. Good night.